So, why am I so indecisive? So, indecision is predominantly a freeze response. We're in decision paralysis, we're overthinking, or we're procrastinating and avoiding a decision altogether. The reason that we do this is because our brain is wired for safety, and safety means keeping you alive. And so if your brain could keep you bubble wrapped, where you never eat anything new, you never do leave the house, you never like are exposed to any sort of stressor whatsoever, your brain would love that. That's the only way your brain would actually think that you're safe. And so our brain will prioritize safety over progress. So if we need to make a decision to move forward, our brain's like, oh, it's so nice and safe here. I know everything that's going on. I don't have to use a lot of energy. I don't want to use that energy because I think we're about to be chased by a lion and I'm saving all my energy for that. Like that's how brains are wired. So what happens when we go into that freeze response is the amygdala is triggered, right? The part of our brain that, along with the hippocampus, that is responsible for the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. Hypothalamus? I don't know. My brain just suddenly forgot which part of the brain it is. So if you're a brain person and I got it wrong, my apologies. But what happens is the fear center is activated, and then we are scanning for a potential threat. And the potential threat in this case is the wrong decision, right? If I get it wrong, something bad's going to happen. What also happens is the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's responsible for reasoning, emotional regulation, planning, shuts down because our brain is trying to conserve energy because of the fear. And then it's hard to make any choice. Like there's literally less blood in the brain. It's gone to our limbs. And so the desire to get it right will actually lead to no decision at all. And I want to dive into that because not deciding is a decision. Like if you take nothing away from this little one today, not deciding is a decision. You're just deciding not to decide. All decisions happen in a second, even if we take 10 years or 2 days or 2 seconds to make the decision, it's always going to be that way. Okay, so what's going on with our socialization that could be at play in our nervous system? So all of us are taught that there's like a right and a wrong, which is all made up, right? We can decide what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad. The reason that we don't want to make the wrong decision is because of how we think we're going to feel and what we're going to believe about ourselves if we do. I'm an idiot. I can't believe I did that. I'm such a moron, right? I'm never going to like get through this. This sucks, right? All of the, if only I would have done more, I could have done this, right? If only this would have gone this way, then I wouldn't be here right now feeling terrible. But that's created by ourselves. And I'm going to get into this in the tips. But what we're afraid of happening, the shoulds and the coulds and the woulds and feeling really crappy, is 100% in our control. We don't have to not have our own back. We don't have to should, could, and would all over ourselves. And then when we're, continuing with the socialization, this can be further compounded whether, if you were in a family or a culture, right, where mistakes were punished or overly scrutinized, right, in your, like, however you grew up, then making the wrong decision, your brain has associated with punishment and rejection, which are two like core things that will absolutely activate your nervous system. And then women and folks from marginalized communities, right? We're going to second guess our decisions because we're afraid of being too assertive or too reckless or too emotional or too whatever, right? And mistakes, we've grown up to understand that our mistakes are less tolerated than those within the dominant culture. And so another piece that could be part of this is the people pleasing, right? Where we don't make a decision because we're more worried about the impact our decision will have on other people than not making the decision or making the decision will actually have on us. And finally, We have this generalized idea that we should feel certain about a decision before we act, right? We think that certain is something that will happen if we talk to enough people and do enough research and wait enough amount of a time, right? That certainty will come along. But if you spend any time in this space with me, you'll know that certainty comes from your thoughts. It comes from a belief, something like, I will make this decision that I'm making right now the right one, right? Rather than I have to make the right decision, that's going to create anxiety, that's fear, right? I will make the decision right. It's a very different thing. I will stand behind myself and have my own back. That will create certainty. That will create trust. You know that you don't have to be afraid of yourself being mean in the future. Okay, so what can we expect to come up as far as feelings and emotions when this happens? Well, we're going to feel overwhelmed from analyzing every single possible outcome, right? We're going to feel self-doubt from second guessing our instincts. We're going to feel frustrated because we're not able to decide quickly. And we're going to be mentally exhausted from looping through the same cycle over and over and over again, because our brain has told us that we're not safe, but we have to keep analyzing all the things, but we can't get it wrong, right? And that is what will create so much exhaustion. So, of course, right, knowing all of this, of course, we over research and overwhelm ourselves with information. Of course, we do. Of course, we ask multiple people for advice and still are not sure what we want to do, right? Of course, we delay so long that often a decision is made for us rather than by us. And of course, we decide to do something and then immediately question it. Of course, we do. That makes total sense. So, if we stay in this cycle without the awareness that we are creating the indecision, we are creating the overwhelm, we are creating the mental exhaustion, then we end up in decision fatigue, where we feel so exhausted that we actually can't make good decisions, right? We're just so tired that, and our nervous system is so activated that our prefrontal cortex is like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have enough blood in like to help you make a reasonable decision, right? Or we have lost opportunities because not deciding is a decision, or more self-doubt, right? Because we're fulfilling some idea of like, I'm not a good decision maker. I'm someone who needs time. I like to do my research, whatever these things are, right? Think about how much faster you could move through life if you were able to make decisions and then trust yourself, right? And also trust of like, oh yeah, that wasn't great. It didn't work out. I'm just gonna try something else, right? Low stakes. And then what happens ultimately is we get into a cycle of regret and second guessing, right? And that's really the kind of the crux of it, is because it becomes a circular thing where we don't make a decision, then something bad happens, and then we think, oh, that's because of this thing I was trying to do and I didn't make a decision, and right, and I'm not a good decision maker. And it all can kind of like keep reinforcing itself and keep creating more and more self-doubt. So here's what we can try. Here are my suggestions for you of tips to make this, to be more decisive and also to have your own back. So one thing we can do, particularly if we're thinking about making a big decision, right, is just think about the next step, not every step, right? Because a lot of times we think I need to know all the steps because I have to get it right. And if I can't get it right, then I don't want to do it at all. But clarity comes from movement, not from waiting. You won't know every step. The only way that you will know every step is when it's done. And so if you need to know every step before you can start, you're just never going to get off the starting line. Certainty doesn't exist outside of creating it for ourselves. It's not something that we can research or talk to friends or whatever to create. We can get information, but that's not going to create a feeling of certainty. I think we've all done this where we've asked everyone, we've done all the research, and then we still don't make a decision, right? Like more information does not create certainty. Sometimes it makes it worse, right? Because then we're like, oh, I didn't even know that there were all these variables. Now I really don't want to deal with it. What we can do with that, right, is understand that the only reason we're looking for certainty is because of how we're going to feel in the future. And so we can decide, no matter what happens, I'm going to have my own back. I'm not going to should, could, and would all over myself, no matter what happens. I'm going to support myself and my decision, and I'm just going to keep it moving, right? You can decide to make what I was saying earlier, the decision right. And right itself is made up. So whatever's the right decision, you can decide that. No one else can decide that. They made it up too. And then we want to uninvite what I call the Uda triplets. The shoulda, the coulda, the woulda. I should have done this, right? All of these things create shame. So there's already going to be something. If your plan doesn't work out, you're going to feel disappointed, frustrated, angry, like maybe humiliated. Who knows, right? But what happens is that we invite in the Uda triplets and they start shoulding, coulding, and woulding all over everything. You should have done this. If only you would have done that, right? And that creates shame on top of the frustration, anger, disappointment, whatever it is. And so what we want to do, and no bad bitch ever took over the world from a place of shame. We just want to uninvite the Uda triplets from coming in, and then we can be less afraid of how we'll feel if something doesn't work out. We'll just deal with the disappointment, but we won't pile the shame on top. So a couple thoughts for you to try that come from my personal library of thoughts that I worked on is, one is, if I indulge in regret, I will stop making decisions. If I keep going back and beating myself up for a wrong decision that I made before, a wrong turn, some time wasted, some money wasted, some effort wasted, right? If I indulge in that, I will stop making decisions because I will be afraid of continuing to try the things I need to do that get me the life that I want, that get me the success that I want. And then the other one that I really, really love, and this one works generally, but particularly when we're feeling like really overwhelmed, is if I wasn't going to make this dramatic, I would, and then fill in the blank, right? Just see what the answer is. If I wasn't going to make it dramatic, that no one came to my 7-day challenge, right? Then I would just use that content for something else, use the learning that I got out of it, right? And keep it moving.